Good morning and good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar from the Channel Institute and Channeliser on best practices in building solid channel relationships. Just a few pieces of housekeeping before we get going. So firstly, the presentation should last approximately 30 minutes, and that will be followed by an interactive Q&A session. So do please add your questions in the question box as we go through the presentation, and we'll get to them at the end and we'll read and respond then. Also, a recording of this webinar will be made available to everyone over the coming days. Just to give you the background, so my name is Mike Kelly. I'm founder of the Channel Institute, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Anne Lambton and Jackie Rand, who are both directors of Channeliser. For anybody not familiar with the Channel Institute, and most people on this webinar will be, but we're a training and certification body for the channel business sector. And our courses are reviewed and approved by an industry advisory council made up of some of the largest technology employers worldwide. All of our courses and certification exams are 100% online. So we currently have a certificate in channel management, a certificate in channel marketing, a certificate in digital co-marketing, and in Q1 of next year, we'll be bringing out the certificate in channel sales. You can take free trials of all of our courses if you haven't already done so. And we also license our training content to technology companies who are building out their own training programs. With that, let me pass over to Jackie to introduce herself and tell you a little bit about Channeliser.
Thanks very much, Mike, and hello to everybody. Channeliser basically has two solutions. Firstly, a social network for the IT industry as a whole, which is free to join for any IT company looking to locate and work with another IT company. So, for instance, resellers looking for solutions or vendors looking for channel partners. Then secondly, we've taken that technology and built a social platform for vendors or distributors to include social into their own partner portal or website. So securely and for just their partners, but enabling them to engage, communicate and interact with their own partner communities. And we offer services to help build those partner channels. So that's in essence what Channeliser does.
Fabulous, thanks, Jackie. And let me jump into the agenda today, what we're going to try to cover. Well, we want to bring you our best practices related to channel relationships and give you some food for thought, but also maybe challenge some of the existing thinking out there based on experience and research from both Channeliser and Channel Institute. So we'll get an introduction into channel conflict to start with, because really that is very much at the core of constructive relationships, dealing with conflict in the right way. We'll look at different ways to mitigate conflict and also, most importantly, resolution styles. And there is an area where I think we might challenge some current thinking. We'll then look at how to encourage partner loyalty and also how to build stronger reseller relationships, and then bring up a summary. So first of all, what is channel conflict? And with Channel Institute, we always like to go somewhere neutral for these definitions because there are so many opinions out there. So let's look at Wikipedia. And essentially Wikipedia is saying that channel conflict occurs when the brands bypass their channel partners. And typically that's done where they start to sell products directly to consumers through standard marketing channels or over the internet. And when does this type of thing happen? Well, a lot of the time it happens when there's overproduction, where there's a surplus of products and manufacturers start to get a little desperate. And also, of course, selling over the internet while at the same time maintaining a physical distribution network. But there are also a lot of disruptive forces that are increasing the prevalence of conflict when they're not planned for and are not included in a strategy. The new buyer's journey being an obvious one. And for anybody not familiar with the new buyer's journey, it's a very important part of all aspects of sales and marketing these days. But the new buyer's journey essentially means that your buyers are doing most of their research before they contact any of your salespeople at all. Whether they contact a vendor salespeople or a channel partner salespeople, they've already done something like 70% of their research. And that means that they're much more informed than they used to be, and that can drive a change in behavior. And linked to that is then inbound marketing, where, of course, vendors and channel partners are very focused on driving inbound leads. And those leads can come from anywhere. So that starts to tear apart the physical segmentation of markets, industrial segmentation of markets, and so on. And of course, the internet has been a hugely disruptive force for everything, but certainly when it comes to relationships. So manufacturers can go direct. And what are the causes of channel conflict specifically? Well, the biggest one, of course, is vendors not honoring their own rules regarding things like deal registration programs. That's a real problem, and there's no simple solution to that. That requires discipline. But also where conflict creeps in through emerging strategies. So vendors perhaps shifting their go-to-market strategy from an indirect to a direct sales team, whether that's deliberate or emergent. And also where you have things like a vendor services arm competing against them, or losing deals direct to a sales team. So all of these things increase the channel conflict. And of course, where policies are not being fully implemented, where sales engagements and territories have been already defined, the vendors, for example, are not adhering to their own policies. And as well, there are two types of channel conflict. The standard one that we all think of course, is direct, where there's a manufacturer, there's a channel partner, somebody's disobeying the rules, and that leads to conflict. But the more prevalent, and the one that's increasing more, especially with the advent of cloud, is inter-channel conflict, where not only do you have VAR to VAR conflict, for example, but now maybe you have MSP to VAR, and also, for example, in the ERP space, where perhaps you have financial services companies that are now getting involved as well. So this idea of hybrid partners who are very different from one another and starting to encroach on each other's territory, the customer doesn't really care where they get it from, as long as they get the right product and the right solution and services with that. So that's leading to an awful lot more channel conflict that has to be dealt with. Which then leads us to, well, what's the impact of all of this? Well, firstly, there's a big impact on customers. It gives them more power. So where customers understand that there's channel conflict going on, well, they'll use that to their own advantage, and they'll use that as leverage, especially where you have sophisticated business-to-business buyers, trained procurement professionals. They may delay purchases to make sure that they get the best deal. They may set partners offset against one another to try and get the best discounts. But also it can lead to a situation which in marketing terms is known as cognitive dissonance, but it's where a customer regrets the purchase that has already been made, because perhaps they find out from one of your channel partners later on that they could have got a better deal. So that's a real problem, and that's a major thing in marketing that has to be dealt with. Of course, there's a massive impact then on channel partners if there is ongoing conflict, and if it's substantial conflict, that leads to a decrease in morale within the channel, and also lower employee engagement, and of course less mind share for you as a vendor. And then within your own company, your staff are getting frustrated with channel partners, and perhaps that's also leading to missed revenue targets. So quite significant impact of serious channel conflict, and we'll look in a few slides time at the different levels of conflict that are engaged with. And actually here we are right now. So it's important to realize that not all conflict is the same, and that there's a spectrum of conflict, and it's very important to track where you are on that spectrum, and also track the direction that you're moving in. So At the lowest level, there's latent conflict. It's murmurings on the ground. There's some discord, but it's not a massive issue. The next step up then is perceived conflict. And this is where you start to notice that discord a little bit more. There's no huge cause for alarm, but there's definite concern there, and you can note that. And it's at that point that you don't want it to get any more serious than this. The next stage then is felt. And this is where it is reaching a stage of concern and alarm. It's at this point that something has to be done, action has to be taken, and the channel team really need to get together and build a strategy for dealing with this before it reaches the next stage, which is the most serious, and that is manifest, which is openly antagonistic behavior and confrontation, either between partners or between the vendor and the partner. So I like this model of looking at conflict. I think it's very helpful. It's a great way of mapping out perhaps where your relationships are, and especially to do this by partner segment. It gives some great intelligence, some great insights. There's also structural indicators of conflict, of course, that we have to be aware of. So, for example, if your market has recently moved through a transition point, so in terms of the progression of an industry, if it's moving from a very emergent market to growth, or it's moving from growth to maturity and so on, that structural change in your industry is likely to put pressure on your relationships and should give you a red flag around conflict, and that you're going to need to start building a plan for this. Also, whether there's been any recent changes to the channel strategy in your company, of course, that will lead to more. A good one to really track is, are you starting to get more requests from your channels team or sales teams for special prices? That can indicate that something is happening on the ground and people are starting to feel pain on the ground and are trying to alleviate that pain, and they're trying to do it through special pricing. Well, what's causing the pain? Perhaps you're moving from latent conflict into something a bit more serious. And other things, of course, are like gross margins eroding, a significant loss of market share, and of course, a massive red flag is a noticeable drop off in the number of partners that you have. And a very important question to ask is, well, do you want to completely eliminate conflict within your channel? And the answer really is no, you don't. That's not what you're here to do. What we're here to do is manage this conflict. A certain amount of conflict between vendor and partner and between partners is a sign of a healthy relationship. So totally eliminating channel conflict, not only is it not realistic, it's probably not even desirable. Also, it indicates that you do have adequate market coverage. So a certain amount of conflict can lead to good competition happening between all of the different partners, and ultimately will raise the standards for everybody and make sure that we have high performance right across the wider business. So the goal is not to completely eliminate conflict, it's to manage it, mitigate the drivers of conflict so that it doesn't start to become destructive and affect your customers. And how might you go about doing that? Well, firstly, marketing and communications are clearly important, and making sure that they're consistent. This is one of the big problems that partners often give out about. So making sure that you're getting a single message out there. Also, making sure that your partners are fully trained and certified, and that they understand exactly what the policies are and how they should be behaving. Getting the right data into your company, so having the right information at your fingertips will enable you to see if there's a problem and also see how you might resolve that before it gets any more serious. And of course, collaborating with your partners around different strategies and helping them to move forward and helping to reduce that conflict. And of course, you need to set some clear rules at the very start of all of this. So things like who are the people who are going to deal with conflict when it arises? If we come up with a new strategy around managing these relationships, how does the team work? What are the roles and responsibilities? Of course, segmenting out your market to make sure that you know which is for the direct sales team and which is for channels. So all of these standard things need to be done, but also you need to deal with non-standard things. So where a non-standard deal arises, well, how will you deal with that? So when a different type of partner is taken on board who perhaps brings something additional to the table, well, how will you get all of these partners to work together for the benefit of the customer? Because ultimately that's where we want to be. And then looking at resolution styles, this is a very important slide, because this is how we start to understand our own personal styles of managing conflict, but also looking at our company and thinking, okay, as a company, what is our culture? When conflict arises, how do we work with our partners around that? Do we avoid it? So essentially, do we kick the can down the road and hopefully that it will solve itself? Do we become quite aggressive about this? Maybe we draw red lines and start to become a little dictatorial, telling partners exactly how they must behave and constantly pointing to the rule book and the policies, which perhaps we never consulted with them on in the first place. Accommodation is another one, and this is where one party simply surrenders to the other. And here we're talking about not just channel partners, but of course strategic alliances as well. So it's important to take that perspective for long tail, high volume partners. Maybe one style will work, but for strategic alliances, perhaps we need to have a different type of partnership. The next one then is compromise. And compromise, I suppose, is where we see a lot of channel directors, channel managers fall, where everybody is taking a step forward or a step back. But this really only works with issues that are non-strategic and are not that serious. But where we are talking about very strategically important decisions, well, the next model is normally more effective for that. And that's where we're talking about collaboration. So this is the win-win approach, maximizes benefits to all parties. And really, that's where you want to be heading for these sort of strategically important issues, where everybody gets together. Even if we already have policies in place, well, perhaps we need new policies here. Perhaps the world has changed. Perhaps what we have inherited is no longer accurate enough. So that collaboration piece is very important. On that note, let me hand over to Jackie, who'll bring you through partner loyalty, and then Anne also.
Thanks very much, Mike. So next slide, please. Okay, so first of all, I think it's increasingly difficult as a vendor to stay competitive, and this can be for a number of different reasons. To start with, there are far more vendors and solutions in market. When I started out back in the day working for Peter Norton Security, there was only one competitor with Dr. Solomon and a handful of other security solutions, whereas now there are literally thousands. And this growth is reflected across the board, you know, with cloud, the Internet of Things, mobile apps, every sector of technology, so that there are now not just tens of thousands, but hundreds of thousands of solutions out there. So it's very difficult to sort of stay top of mind. And there's also, as Mike alluded to, far more different routes to market with what's popularly known as the shadow channel, so other advisors and different ways to purchase solutions. And there's also a growth in the number of mergers and acquisitions. And what this results in is that there are fewer larger VARs. So this all sort of contributes to make it harder to be noticed as a vendor for your solution to be out there. Many of the traditional VARs have also been around almost as long as I have, and so the proprietor is near retirement age, and so many of those businesses are changing hands. And also finally, the buyer's journey as well that Michael alluded to, that's changed and is done online, and that's not just customers that are better informed, but also partners as well. So they're doing their due diligence online, and that online space is very noisy. So really all that boils down to is how do you stay top of mind and how do you keep your partners more loyal? So next slide, if I may, please. There are many reasons why partners leave, the single most influential of which is how easy you are to do business with. And, you know, this is if your your systems are cumbersome, or your portal is hard to navigate, or you're not responsive to your partners, they will leave. There are so many other alternatives out there, as we've just explained. With the fast moving technology landscape, also, has your product kept up? Or even has your proposition surrounding it, and are you verbalizing that to your partners properly? Have you communicated to your partners what it is that you're doing for the market now? And finally, does your program enable partners to make enough money and margin? So there are many, many reasons why they could leave. Next slide, please. And so this is where you come down to having a kind of hygiene factor. So a minimal requirement that you need to go through, a checklist that you need to ensure that you're easy to do business with and everything is sorted. All your ducks are in a row. So do you have your product USP clearly verbalized? Do your partners understand that? Does your portal help partners rather than hinder them? Does your program of learning and education reflect what your partners need? Is there a simple process with useful systems that actually takes partners on that journey and supports them? Do you have clear rules of engagement, as Mike has suggested? And finally, do you have to partner and through partner marketing, and being very definitive about both of those? Do you enable your partners to use your marketing materials, and do you communicate properly to your partners? So moving on to the next slide, that communication piece is vital in terms of communicating to your partners. And for this, you need to kind of understand who your partners are and have them profiled and segmented, at least into the three major buckets. First of all, partner recruitment, and this is really a sales process and one that requires a nurturing process of communication, because recruitment is all about timing, really. So, you know, a prospective partner will probably mostly be busy. They'll have, you know, year end or be working on a deal, and they'll really only start working with you if they have an opportunity that's relevant to your solution. So you need to keep nurturing them with communications in the meantime. And then there are the PAM managed, partner account managed partners. Those are usually the most productive partners, usually because they're the biggest as well. And my colleague Anne is going to talk to you about those, and then I'm going to come back and talk to you about the long tail. So I'm going to hand over to Anne on the next slide, please, Mike.
Thanks, Jackie. So how do PAMs really drive partner loyalty? I think certainly in the biggest partners, they are one of the single biggest factors that will keep your partners loyal. And there are a number of factors around this. Certainly in terms of how you communicate with them and how responsive you are. So think about the communication. In my yesteryear, it used to be a phone call or an email. Well, these days there's WhatsApp, there's text messages, there's all sorts of collaboration tools out there. So be respectful to your partners. Find out what is the way they like to communicate, because not everybody likes using WhatsApp or text. Some prefer to keep to more traditional routes like email. Getting that sort of deep business relationship, that comes down to really getting some good partner, joint partner planning, and I'll come on to that in the next slide. We've heard from Mike about managing conflict. Mike's jumped ahead. We've heard about managing conflict, and you know, Mike did a great job in terms of talking about the different strategies. Well, your partner account managers are on the coalface. They're the people that have to take ownership, and they're the ones that really, you know, getting over that conflict, they're the people that are going to make this happen. If you can get a lot of this stuff right, the trust and respect with your partners will follow. So next slide, sorry, Mike. So joint business planning. This is not doing a sales forecast. I've seen so many examples where people come back going, yep, done a joint business plan, and all it is basically is saying, this is how much revenue my partner's going to drive in the next year. This is their best guess. That's not what we're trying to get to here. Joint business planning is really about understanding your partner's business. So to do that, you need to understand what drives your partner, how do they make money, and what is their value proposition. And then from that, you should be able to verbalize a joint business proposition. So, you know, your solution plus their services equals what to the customer, and really think about how you can verbalize this. This is so important. certainly from a perspective in terms of how you're going to drive business together, but also to make sure that your own company understands what the value of that partner is. And if they can understand it, you may well overcome some of the conflict issues that we spoke about earlier. The better understood, the better communicated, the more loyal partners are going to be to you. So do spend the time to work out what it is your partner has, how they can grow their business. Also think in terms of, what is it that they're good at? What is the niche? And try and encourage them to build something that is specific to them. So when they're doing a proposition to the market, this is how you overcome a lot of the partner-to-partner conflict that's out there. The more niche and the more specific their offering is to the market, the less likely they are to go head-to-head with all the other partners out there. There's also an argument as well about looking at your partners and how they might work more effectively together. You may have a small partner that has got a very strong vertical knowledge, working with a bigger partner. And having the two working together may create a much stronger proposition to market. And the more these companies work with each other and the more they can drive business, the more loyal they're going to stay to you. Next slide, please. So having done the joint business proposition, we're then now looking at the marketing. So marketing or joint marketing is not about taking, the stuff that you've created and just slapping the partner's logo on it. It really does need to reflect that joint proposition that you and your partner want to take to market. Also think about your MDF programs. Jackie and I have certainly heard on so many different occasions where partners get so dissatisfied around MDF programs because they're so complicated. I do get the fact that marketing people want to ensure there's a good ROI, but do make sure that they don't get so complex and the overhead of administrating them so big for the partners that they quite frankly just want to walk away from them. Other things to think about is possibly getting distributors to help bunch partners together. If you've got 3 or 4 partners that don't have a huge MDF pot, perhaps there's a way of bringing those partners together so that they can do a campaign together and just consolidate some of that MDF and make it a better proposition and a more effective use of marketing funds. And obviously be prepared to go to partner events and speak at the events if that's what's required. Next slide. Joint sales activities. We've touched a bit on this in terms of how to avoid conflict. When you're working with a direct sales force and a channel, it is so important that the channel understands what the rules are. And part of that is going to be encouraging your sales teams to do joint sales activities with the partners. This goes back to what I was saying about you really understanding your partners. The more you understand them and the more your salespeople understand them, the more likely they are to bring them into deals. It's really good. If you've got a strong vertical and you've got 3 partners that are really strong in that vertical and they've all got slightly different expertise, well, that's great. If your sales guys know that they're going into that vertical, they can bring the partners with them. That makes a lot of sense. So do think about how you tell and educate your own sales force about the strengths of your partners. If you've got some collaboration tools, then do use them. There are all sorts of ways these days of collaborating with partners, but also bring your salespeople in and use a tool so that you can collaborate around a sales opportunity, and that will help with the transparency and keeping the deals moving forward. Again, make sure your deal registrations and your pipeline management is easy. It is a burden to partners, so the easier it is, the more likely they are to work with it and keep you up to date. Next slide. I think I'm handing back to Jackie now.
You are indeed. Just talking briefly about the long tail of partners. So this is the classic 80-20 rule, although actually in our experience of talking to vendors, the long tail is most often nearer 95%. These could be smaller niche partners, as Anne suggested, those who work in a vertical, but basically sell your solution only occasionally. But they are just as an important part of your partner ecosystem. And managing them usually relies not on partner account managers, but on systems, so that you can ensure that they have all the information at their fingertips. So the reliance on good systems, good portals, good marketing automation is crucial, so that it doesn't actually slow them down, so they can find the information that they need. To do this effectively, you do need to segment this group, because instead of them just receiving a direct mail like a newsletter with 20 pieces of information on it, they need to receive the information that's relevant to them. So your marketing people receive marketing information, your technical people receive technical information, and so on and so forth. And sadly, that's often not the case. So having that segmentation and use of a marketing automation system would be able you to target those communications much, much more effectively. And then also distribution is key, because they have slick logistics. That's just, their raison d'etre. They have that breadth, reach, and they can help with those partners in terms of support and marketing and so forth. Partner events have actually increasingly become more important again. It seems to go full circle. And again, these seem to have become particularly important for the long tail of partners. It's their opportunity to actually shake you by the hand, come and talk to you. But the bottom line is that you need to find a way to be responsive and to be communicating to that long tail of partners, segmenting them, talking to them in their language, to marketing, technical to technical, etc. And also, importantly, as Anne mentioned, allowing partners to collaborate with one another. And it's something we come back to again and again. Next slide, please. So as we say, it's all about communication and collaboration. And I think Anne touched on this particularly. Keep it relevant and make sure you are being following what your partners want. Do they want to be talked to by phone, by text, on social platforms, or at networking events? And just remember, if you use things like LinkedIn and Twitter, not all of your information is seen by your in your groups or by your followers. They have weird algorithms these days that dictate who sees what, and it's not up to the user as to what they see. So be aware that information you're posting on there is only seen by less than 10% of your followers even. So if you want to communicate, you need to make sure that they've opted in and that you are making sure that it's relevant and targeted. Next slide, please. And also, for all of your partners now, so we're talking, from the partner account managed right through to the long tail, there needs to be a learning path that's appropriate for them. So taking 3 people out for a week of training is not going to be more appropriate for the smaller partners. I was with what you'd call a classic long tail partner having coffee the other day, and for them it's all about enablement. They need the learning journey, they need the learning path, but that needs to fit in with their businesses. So they need to be able to do it online as the Channel Institute do, but they also need to know where the product of their vendors fits into their whole portfolio. What's going to give them that differentiating factor? So when you're planning your enablement and readiness, it needs to enable all sorts of different types of partners, for those that are large and have lots of people, to those that are small and only one person who's going to take the training. So you need to take that into consideration. But without a doubt, those that are invested in you are going to be more loyal. So it is key to have those right different partner learning journeys available to the different types of partners. Next slide, please. And just touching on this one final time, another key element you need to consider is with your whole ecosystem is the need for partners to work with other partners. Research shows that increasingly VARs are working with other VARs, and services businesses and different elements within your partner ecosystem, niche specialists who can add value to the larger partners. And you need to be able to find a way to facilitate that collaboration. And you also need to be able to do that to scale. So Anne talked about it from PAMs playing that important role, but you need to find ways to communicate and ways for your partners to interact and work together. So for all of your partners, not just the PAM managed ones as well. So next slide, please. So what's missing? That's listening and learning and being able to understand what's going on. So your PAMs, your partners, surveys are all ways to stay in touch with your market. It's a great source of competitive information, even if you're doing surveys, or a really good resource is actually have a third party to do some interviewing of your partners. You'd be surprised how much more candid your partners will be to a third party if they know that they're going to be anonymous, and just pull together in a general information brief back to the vendors. We've done that a lot for some larger vendors, and that people are much more candid if they think they can be part of that all up information flow back to the vendors. So it's a very useful way to find out what's going on in the marketplace. So thank you. I think we'll just move to our final slide, please. Summary, next one. So there we go. I guess make it easy to do business. There is a checklist that you can go through to ensure that that is the case. Obviously, you have to be profitable for your partners. Remembering that it's a partnership, as Anne said, don't just go and ask for pipeline, deal reg, pipeline. You need to make sure it's a true partnership across all of your partners. And for that, you need to communicate regularly, but also making sure that it's targeted. Don't just blanket emails across, because they'll soon lose patience and won't bother reading a newsletter. And help build those mutual beneficial relationships, partner to partner, partner to vendor, etc. And that other key point of building a whole product, so understanding their businesses and making sure that they can build a portfolio around your solution. So I think that, in summary, is how we have building loyalty and relationships. So I guess handing back to you, Mike, for questions.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jackie. And thanks, Anne, as well. And I'm delighted to see our presentation come in on time. So that's good going. We have a few questions coming in already. And in fact, the first one that I'll read is back to you, Jackie, where you were talking about the long tail of partners. It says, have you seen any tactics that have been particularly effective at getting these partners engaged?
Well, that kind of plays particularly to our own solution, Channeliser, which is all about communicating and engaging all of your partners. So enabling you to, I'll talk about it more generically. What you need to do is segment your different partners, so, and also the people in those that long tail. So you need to know who the marketing contact is, who the proprietor is, and perhaps who the salesperson is. Not much more complicated than that, and ensure that your communications to those are targeted. So as I said before, marketing gets marketing, technical gets technical, and sales gets sales information. And you make sure therefore that they're given regular information that's targeted, and actually giving them access to a portal that isn't difficult, so that they can find the information more easily, rather than being lost in rather monolithic portals that don't allow interaction and engagement. So being able to target the information and communicate regularly, I think, is key, and find a way to be responsive to that long tail. I know it's hard, but you do need to find a way to be responsive and answer questions.
Great, thank you for that. I have another one here that I am trying to read. I've just taken on a role as head of partnerships at a new startup, sub 30 people SaaS. Do you have some high level advice to get started? I'm technical, not business background. And thanks for a great session. Oh, well, thank you very much. Let me hand that to you guys, first of all.
So for a new solution, I didn't hear, did he say how many partners they have? 30 people in the company, but how many partners?
It sounds like it's very early, so sub 30 people. So I think it's probably at the channel recruitment stage and maybe designing the channel program.
Okay, right. First of all, I would suggest, rather than do it wrong, have a third-party consulting business help you with your channel program. I think keeping it simple, keeping it straightforward, but there are some standard gives and gets, and actually getting that right first time will save you so much time and effort going forward, so that you've got the right channel program in place. And also, I mean, if it's a SaaS-based company and it's a relatively small business, getting the right technology in place as well to support those new partners. So marketing automation, the basic partner portal, and communication tools are key, so that you're doing it right from the beginning. So the right program and the right tools to support those partners. And by all means, both Anne and I will be happy to connect with anyone on LinkedIn and answer further questions. As a result, you know, we can dig down in more detail.
Can I just add one more comment before you move on? What most people do when they're starting out is they fail to recognise that you have to have a really good, strong to partner value proposition. Your product is not enough. You need to think about why a partner would want to take your solution on, and going through that thought process, I think, is fairly key, especially before you start recruiting them. So just another little comment for you.
That's a good one.
Yeah, and I think from the Channel Institute perspective, it's interesting when we look at our analytics and people hitting our website. A lot of the time we see the search channel program template, and that immediately tells us, well, a lot of people think, look, we'll go out there, we'll get a channel program template from somewhere, and off we go. But really, it's about strategy, and it needs to be thought through. And I think you do. And nobody here is selling here, because none of us do this. But there are consultants that can help you think further down the road, help you look around the corner to make sure that you're not building a program that's going to blow up as soon as you try to scale it. So it's one thing trying to, recruit and manage 5 to 10 partners, but if you start getting into the hundreds, that's when the cracks will appear, and it's very difficult to roll back on that. So it's an excellent question. Thank you very much for that, and hopefully we've given you some food for thought. Let me move on to the next one. In your experience, what's the single biggest reason that partners do not cooperate effectively with vendors?
Because you're not easy to do business with. I think, as we indicated through the presentation, now that could be a number of reasons. It could be you're not responsive. You can't get information that you want from a static, dull partner portal that's riddled with out-of-date, lengthy information. You just can't get to the right information. So I think, being easy to do business with, and that, as I say, there is a checklist and we can help with that, but being easy to do business is first and foremost.
I think also trust as well. If there's no trust between yourself and the partner, they're unlikely to cooperate, because they're thinking the whole time that you are going to stitch them up. I'm not going to tell you about a deal because you'll just go and take it direct. It's that kind of attitude, I would imagine, that is a major cause of it as well.
Yeah, and from the Channel Institute side, and look, let me apologise as I answer this, because there is a part sales pitch in here, but obviously this is what we see, that the vendors are bringing out all of this channel marketing technology and adding to the MarTech stack, and then they're saying, now use this and go to our channel partner marketing portal and get all of our content and co-brand it. But a lot of partners, even the more sophisticated, the larger ones, they don't understand things like buyer personas, the buyer's journey, how to match all of this. So they don't have the soft skills. And what we're also seeing is that, frighteningly, a lot of the channel marketing people, even at some of the largest technology vendors, don't necessarily understand those things. And they will admit openly, we don't feel comfortable in coaching our channel partners on this. And that's coming from the channel marketing people, let alone the channel managers themselves. So I think one of the things that we see is that a lot of partners are not engaging, for example, with digital co-marketing campaigns, because they lack the soft skills, and the vendors people lack the soft skills as well. So again, apologies for there's a side pitch there, but that's just something that we see day after day. One other one here that's coming through. Do you have any suggestions? I suppose a little bit like earlier on. Do you have any suggestions about how we might encourage more partner-to-partner communication?
Yes, I think it's key to enable, as Anne said, with regards to those partners that are PAM managed, then that's a direct relationship, and therefore understanding that that partner's business will be able to see where they could potentially work with other smaller niche partners with specific skills or technologies that's going to help them. To do that to scale, you need to be able to bring your partners into a community. You need to enable them to interact with one another. So on your portal, you need to facilitate that. So you need to enable partners to, when they're in your own portal, potentially look for other partners and find those that map to their skills and complementary technologies and so on and so forth. So to do it on scale, you need to enable to bring them into a community so that they can interact and self-serve that partner-to-partner piece.
Great. And anything you wanted to add there? Are we good?
No, I think we're good. Jackie's done a good job there.
The last question I have is, you mentioned disruptive forces driving channel conflict. What do you think will be disruptive forces in the future?
Oh, well, I think that just the change and the number of vendors out there has got to be one of the top ones. I mean, we said that right at the start. I think Forrester predict there will be more than 1 million software or applications out there by 2020. You know, the scale of growth in you know, mobile apps and security products, and just the sheer number of applications out there is mind-bending, and therefore the noise level online, if you're trying to advertise or trying to get mind share, is phenomenal. So, you know, the sort of the platforms that you're trying to actually attract people and get them to see your solution are just very noisy and very crowded. So I think that's got to be a major point, and trying to actually stand out from the crowd as a vendor is really hard.
Yeah, I mean, certainly from our side at Channel Institute, we see what you've mentioned, shadow channel. Shadow channel is what we hear the whole time. And everybody, even the most sophisticated, largest tech vendors worldwide, are struggling with this shadow channel because it's emerging and it's changing every quarter. So it's difficult to keep pace with that. It's difficult to keep ahead of it. So certainly shadow channel is something that we constantly see. Great. Well, look, that is all of the questions for today's one. So I'd just like to firstly thank Anne and Jackie for joining Channel Institute today and sharing all of the best practices and all of your insights. So thank you both.
Pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Thanks for everybody who attended as well, taking the time out from your busy days. I hope you enjoyed the webinar, and I look forward to you joining us on future webinars. So thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.